Ever wonder what's going on behind the scenes at your favorite restaurant? It's not just about the food, right? It's this whole game of numbers, this strategy called profit margins. And today, we are diving deep into this world. We're using Monuville blog's article called What is the Average Profit Margin for a Restaurant?
It's true. People don't always realize that delicious food doesn't automatically equal a successful business. It's those profit margins that really tell you, are they thriving or are they just barely making it?
So true. So whether you're thinking of opening your own place or maybe investing in that food truck you've had your eye on, or even if you're like me and just obsessed with how restaurants actually make money, this deep dive is for you. Let's break it down. The article starts with these three main types of profit margins: gross profit, operating profit, and net profit.
Think of it like layers, yeah. Each one tells you a little more about the financial health of the restaurant. Gross profit, that's your most basic layer. What's left after you've covered the costs of your food and drinks? So let's say you make $50,000, but you spent $20,000 on ingredients. That's a 60% gross profit margin.
Okay, so that's just the start. Then you've got operating profit. That's where those real-world costs come in, right?
Exactly. Operating profit includes everything else you need to actually run the restaurant. Your staff's salaries, rent, those energy bills from running the ovens all day long, everything.
So it's a much more complete picture. And then finally, you've got the bottom line, the net profit margin.
Right, exactly. After you've paid all your expenses, your taxes, loan interest, everything, net profit is what you actually get to keep, is how you know if you're truly in the green.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The article says that profit margins can change a lot depending on what kind of restaurant you're talking about. Like fast food places are usually rolling in it, right?
Pretty much. We call those quick service restaurants, or QSRs. They're all about volume and efficiency. Think 6-9% profit margin, keeping costs low and getting those customers in and out quickly.
Makes sense. And then you have those cozy neighborhood spots, those casual dining places. They've got to find that sweet spot between quality and keeping prices reasonable.
Absolutely. Casual dining restaurants, they're usually aiming for a 4-7% profit margin. It's about good food, decent service, and a price that has people coming back for more.
Tougher to get that balance right. What about fine dining? Amazing food, beautiful atmosphere, but those experiences come at a premium.
They do, for sure. Fine dining, they usually have the slimmest profit margin, something like 3-5%. You've got your high-end ingredients to experienced and expensive chefs, and often those locations cost a fortune.
Crazy how much the dining experience plays into those numbers. What about cafes? Seems like there's one on every corner these days.
Cafes, they're interesting. Smaller spaces, simpler menus, and those high-profit drinks, that latte you get every morning, they can often pull in 7-10% profit.
Interesting. So even though those are just averages, it's clear what you choose to serve and how you serve it makes a big difference. But the Monuville blog goes even deeper, highlighting some of the specific factors that impact those profit margins. They start with food costs, which seems pretty straightforward.
You'd think so, but there's more to it than just the price of ingredients. You want those food costs to be around 28-35% of what you're bringing in. This is where something called menu engineering becomes crucial.
Menu engineering. Sounds like some next-level culinary strategy.
It really is. It's about pricing your menu strategically to get the most profit. You figure out which dishes are high profit, low food cost, but customers perceive them as valuable, and then you feature them on your menu so people order them.
So it's not just about what tastes good together, it's about what makes financial sense. Now, labor costs, those have got to be huge for restaurants.
Massive. You want those to be about 25-30% of your revenue. Smart scheduling, training your staff to do multiple jobs, even bringing in some automation can help keep those costs down.
Right. And then there's that ever-present overhead. Rent alone, especially in a big city, must be a killer.
Oh, definitely. Ideally, you want rent to be around 6-10% of your revenue. But finding that perfect location, one that's visible, accessible, and affordable, it's a tough one. Utilities are another big one. You can save by focusing on energy efficiency.
And what about food waste? I can't even imagine how much perfectly good food ends up in the trash.
It's a huge issue, really. Inventory management is key here. Think tracking systems, smart ordering, finding creative ways to use those leftovers. Little things make a big difference.
Every penny counts.
Exactly. Now, even when you think you've got it all figured out, there are some common traps that can really hurt those profits.
Let's hear them. Forewarned is forearmed, right?
What are the biggest? Overestimating sales.
Yeah.
That early excitement can lead to overspending too much staff, too much inventory. You have to be realistic.
So don't let your excitement get ahead of you. Do your research, make a solid business plan.
Exactly. And those hidden costs.
Yeah.
Don't forget about them. Maintaining equipment, credit card processing fees, they add up.
And don't forget about what they call it, shrinkage.
Ah, yes, shrinkage. Whether it's accidental or, let's be honest, theft, it can make a dent in those profits. Good security, tight inventory control, those are must-haves.
Keep those cameras rolling.
Exactly. Now let's talk suppliers. Don't just settle for the first one you find. You need to shop around, compare prices, negotiate.
Play the field a little, see what's out there.
Exactly. Ask for bulk discounts. See what their payment terms are like. Don't rely on just one supplier. And lastly, managing those labor costs.
It's such a tricky thing, right? You need good people for a great restaurant, but you don't want to be in the red because of it.
Right. Scheduling is key. Too many staff when it's slow, too few when it's busy, both can hurt you.
It's a recipe for disaster, for sure. What about staff turnover? Isn't hiring and training new staff all the time really expensive?
Incredibly expensive. Create a good work environment, offer decent wages, and you'll have a better chance of keeping those good employees.
Invest in your people, and they'll invest in your success. Makes sense. Well, we've covered a lot of ground already. When we come back, we'll be taking our appetites on a global tour, checking out how those restaurant profit margins measure up in different parts of the world. You won't believe the differences. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everyone. Ready to take those taste buds on a trip around the world? Because in this part of our deep dive, we are looking at how restaurant profit margins can be so different depending on where you are. What works in one country might be a recipe for disaster in another.
Oh, absolutely. Every country has its own unique set of economic ingredients, you could say, that affect how profitable restaurants can be.
So true. The Minuvial blog post actually dives into some interesting comparisons, starting with two major players, the US and Europe. You'd think they'd be pretty similar, but there are some surprising differences.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. The U.S. restaurant industry, it's famous for being super competitive, tons of different cuisines. They typically see profits between 3–6%.
Really? That seems kind of low. I always imagine American restaurants doing really well.
Well, there are a few reasons for that. Labor costs in the U.S. are often lower than in Europe. Different minimum wage laws, tipping culture, all that. Plus, the U.S. has this huge agricultural industry, big suppliers, so food costs can be lower for restaurants.
Interesting. So what about Europe? Incredible food, but it sounds like their profits might be feeling the pinch a bit more.
Yeah, European restaurants generally have slimmer profit margins, more like 2–5%. One big reason. Labor laws, higher minimum wages, more benefits for employees.
Right, that makes sense. Don't they also have those extra taxes on food and drinks in a lot of European countries?
Exactly. The value-added tax, or VAT. It's meant to fund social programs and all, but it definitely takes a bite out of restaurant profits. And then there's the tipping thing, or rather the lack of it.
Oh, right. Tipping isn't as common in a lot of European countries, so those labor costs are really front and center for restaurant owners.
Exactly. They have to factor in those higher wages from the start, since they can't rely on tips to make up the difference. And rent, especially in those popular European cities.
It's amazing how these cultural and economic differences really add up. Okay, but what about the rest of the world? The Minuvial article, it mentions some interesting things about developing versus developed countries.
This is where it gets really interesting. Restaurants in developing countries, they often face a whole different situation. Labor costs, for example, can be much lower, which is obviously good for profits.
Makes sense.
So you might see restaurants in places like India or Brazil making profit margins of 6–10%, sometimes even higher.
Wow, that's a big difference. But I'm guessing there are other challenges in those markets.
You're absolutely right. Lower labor costs are great, but then you have things like infrastructure, power outages, unreliable transportation, ingredient prices fluctuating because the agricultural systems aren't as established.
So it's a trade-off. Lower costs, but more risk involved.
Exactly. Restaurants in those areas need to be flexible, resourceful. Now, on the other hand, you have restaurants in developed countries. They don't have those super low labor costs, but things are generally more stable.
So they can count on their suppliers, get the ingredients they need, that sort of thing.
Exactly. But it comes at a cost.
Yep.
Higher wages, higher rent, stricter regulations, all that adds up to tighter profit margins, often more like 2–6%.
So it seems like no matter where you are, it's about understanding your situation, finding that balance between keeping costs down and creating a great experience for your diners.
Absolutely. And that actually leads us to a really interesting question that the Minuvial article brings up, something most people wouldn't even think to ask. Is a high profit margin always a good thing?
Now, that is an interesting question. We always think high profit's good, but maybe it's not that straightforward.
Maybe not. Of course, everyone wants to make money, but if you're only focused on squeezing every last cent out of your business, you might be missing something important: quality.
I like that. So it's like anything else. Too much of a good thing.
Right. Like if you put too much salt in a dish, it's ruined. If a restaurant is cutting corners on ingredients, not training their staff properly, sacrificing the atmosphere.
Yeah, they might save money in the short term, but will customers come back?
Exactly. Customers aren't stupid. They notice if the food isn't as good, the service is bad, or the place just doesn't feel welcoming anymore. And those high profits, they start to disappear when people go elsewhere.
So it's about finding that balance, making money, but also making sure you have a great product and a great experience.
Exactly. It's about passion, building something people love, not just looking at the numbers on a spreadsheet all the time.
Yeah.
Profit is important, but it shouldn't be the only thing that matters.
I love that. But how do restaurant owners actually find that balance? How do you make sure you're profitable and that people love your restaurant? We'll get into those strategies when we come back for the final part of our deep dive. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome back, food lovers. We're at the final course of our deep dive into restaurant profit margins, and this is where we swap out those theoretical menus for actionable strategies. How can restaurants rake it in while still serving up an amazing experience? Let's dig in.
I like it. We've crunched the numbers, toured the globe, even dodged some profit-killing pitfalls. Time to get practical, how to build a restaurant that's both profitable and beloved. The Menuvio article has some great ideas, but let's start with something I think is crucial: customer loyalty. Those regulars, the ones who wouldn't go anywhere else for their favorite dish.
Absolutely. Loyal customers. They're not just repeat business, they're walking, talking advertisements for your restaurant. Spreading the word, building that buzz.
So how do you turn those first-time diners into die-hard regulars? Is it as simple as a punch card, or is there more to it?
Loyalty programs are a good start, but you've got to make them more than just a transaction. Forget just points for dollars. Think personalized. Free dessert on their birthday, a discount on their go-to dish. Little things that show you care.
It's like when you go to a coffee shop and they remember your order. Makes you feel like a VIP.
Exactly. And those small gestures, big returns. Imagine you could use your POS system, tailor recommendations based on what they've ordered before, their dietary restrictions.
So if I always get the vegetarian option, I might get a notification about a new plant-based dish.
Exactly. You're paying attention, making a more personal experience, and never underestimate good old-fashioned human interaction. Friendly staff, remembering names, those small details matter.
That feeling of warmth, real hospitality, it's so important. Okay, but beyond those loyal customers, staying ahead of the trends, that's got to be key for long-term success. The restaurant world changes so fast.
Adapt or die, right? And right now, one of the biggest trends is sustainability. Customers want to know where their food is coming from, that you're minimizing waste, all of that.
It's not just about good food, it's about responsible practices, right?
Exactly. Restaurants that get that, they're not just doing the right thing, they're attracting a whole new set of customers who care about those things.
Good for the planet, good for business. And speaking of trends, what about this whole plant-based movement? It's everywhere you look these days.
If not going away. Health reasons, ethical reasons, or maybe people are just bored with the same old thing. You've got to have those delicious, creative, plant-based options.
So it's about being inclusive, having something for everyone.
Exactly. Variety is the spice of life, and it's good for business.
Ah,
Speaking of spice, we can't forget about technology. Love it or hate it, it's changing the game.
it's true. Ordering online, delivery apps, contactless payments, it's what people expect now.
Restaurants have to adapt, meet customers where they are, and increasingly that's on their phones. And don't forget online reviews, social media. You've got to have a presence. Engage with people, respond to feedback. It all matters.
Word of mouth on steroids. All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty. Supply chain and inventory management. Not as exciting, but so important.
Ah, the unsung heroes. This is where things can go south really quickly. Waste, spoilage, that's money down the drain.
You need enough to meet demand, but not so much that you're throwing away tons of food.
Exactly. Investing in inventory management software can be a game changer. It tracks everything, tells you what you need, even automates ordering. No more last-minute panics or mountains of spoiled produce.
Those late-night grocery store runs, the worst. And having a good relationship with your suppliers, negotiating those prices, that's crucial too, right?
Absolutely. Your suppliers are your partners. You've got to work together to get those high-quality ingredients at the right price, consistently.
It's all connected, isn't it? And speaking of connections, let's talk about menu planning. You can't just set it and forget it.
Your menu is a living, breathing thing. It should be evolving new dishes, seasonal ingredients, reflecting what you love to cook.
But always keeping those profit margins in mind.
Absolutely. You've got to analyze your menu regularly. What's selling, what's not, what ingredients are readily available.
So if that truffle oil you love is suddenly super expensive, it might be time to switch things up.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to adjust your prices. If your costs go up, be upfront with your customers. They'll understand.
It's about trust, transparency. And finally, that ever-present challenge, labor costs.
The double-edged sword of the restaurant industry, you need good people, but they're your biggest expense.
So how do you find that balance? How can restaurants manage those costs effectively?
Technology can be a big help. Scheduling software can analyze your busy and slow periods to create the most efficient schedule.
No more calling in extra staff last minute or having people stand around with nothing to do.
Exactly. Cross-training your staff, huge. They can jump in wherever you need them.
Flexibility is key in this business. And let's not forget about rewarding your staff. A little competition never hurt.
Absolutely. Sales contests, customer service awards, anything to recognize those who are going above and beyond. That boosts morale and, in the end, profits.
It's about creating that culture of appreciation, rewarding hard work. It all comes back to building a restaurant that people love to work in and dine in.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Because at the end of the day, a successful restaurant is about more than just profit margins. It's about creating an experience that everyone, your staff and your customers, enjoys.
Well said. Well, this has been an incredible journey. We've explored the fascinating world of restaurant profit margins, uncovered those secrets to building a business that is both financially successful and a culinary destination.
A pleasure.
The pleasure was all mine. As we wrap up this deep dive, think about this. The next time you're enjoying a delicious meal at your favorite spot, take a moment to appreciate the intricate dance of passion, hard work, and smart decisions that made it all possible. It's a beautiful thing. Until next time, happy eating.